Hello, everyone. Today is September 11th, 2024. Welcome to the working group serving uh, weekly meeting. And keep in mind that this is part of the CNCF. So this call will be recorded. And for those of you who want to catch up afterwards, and we are following the code of conduct from CNCF. First, let's start as usual. We can talk about the work stream updates. So overall, across work streams, the working group leads and work stream leads met last Friday, and we identified many problems, potential problems to address as part of this working group. We also touched like what kind of problems can be in scope for us to address. So there are three areas. The first one is the problems can be a project, turned out to be a project that we eventually sponsor in the ecosystem and can support multiple use cases well. And the second one is it's a standardization of common approaches. And the third one is it requires a change in core Kubernetes to accomplish. So all the problems are categorized by work streams, with one exception, that there's a dedicated section for instrumentation. I think this section is dedicated for the problems that we'd like to collaborate with other working groups and serve as a guidance for other working groups to discuss. I don't know, like Clayton, do you wanna go dive into a particular problem or anything you wanna add?
I do think it's worth discussing which problems folks want to take and drive. We've kind of done the work streams.
Mhm.
One of the ideas with the problems was that it would make it more concrete for people to actually be executing on it. So maybe we could discuss that in the open discussion session.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we do want to also give people time to read through the problems too. So please take some time to read. So next is orchestration. I don't have any updates. We are always looking for topics to discuss. Let me know. Feel free to reach out if you have any topics that you'd like us to schedule a dedicated meeting for. And move on for DIA. Any updates,
Yeah,
Sergey?
for DRA, I'm a little bit behind on defining what we want from DRA from work group serving. Device management group met, I think, past week, and they have some plans for 132, and we met as work group serving past week, Friday, and we decided that one of the problems is placing everything on the same network, and I don't think it's matching. So, but I'm a little bit behind on defining what exactly the scenario and how we can formulate with our work stream device management. Yeah, that's basically the update right now.
Okay, is there any link to the discussion or document?
On Friday, like this document that you just presented on Friday, it's
Okay.
where we listed projects that we want for DRA, and I'm trying to map it into what 132 will look like for DRA from device management group.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks. Hey, John, do you want to add anything? Is John here?
I don't see him.
Okay. All right, for auto scaling, Ray is not here today. Does anyone want to speak for Ray?
Ray definitely. So the CA and DRA integration is obviously a key topic. I believe Ray actually next time. I'm hoping this is Ray who added that second comment. Wanted to talk about that, but if somebody else was the one who added the comment, please bring it up. Jack.
I did add the comment, and I can't necessarily speak for Ray, but I wanted to. So it looks like Kuba isn't here either. I've been syncing up with Ray offline with not necessarily the DRA cluster autoscaler integration, but adding some stuff to the working group catalog repo, mainly around HPA reference examples that use latency metrics. But that aside, I do wonder if there's a provisioning request CRD that's sort of nascent in SIG autoscaling that might address that italicized comment there. So yeah, I'll sync up with Kuba and Ray. And certainly definitely on point to support Kuba. Kuba in a lot of in that, if you link through to that GitHub issue, he suggests that he already has some 132 work for cluster autoscaler. So I'll lean in to support that work. I'm not sure if it's emerged in the queue yet, but
yeah, the at least on the comment, Ray and I have had a few discussions. There's autoscaling. Just the general pattern is that you tend to encode into your autoscaling metric a whole bunch of heuristics. We discussed this in the autoscaling examples doc a few months ago, but the heuristic, you take into account a bunch of factors. And so what you end up doing is you have a high level problem, and then you take a bunch of numbers that you derive experimentally, and you experimentally magically derive those into a lower level number. And then if any of your assumptions up here change, then your number is subtly wrong, but you don't know that. So that's been one of the things that Ray and I keep poking on. And so this particular variation of it is, in an ideal world, we would capture somewhere the signal that one of those signals that gets mashed into the HPA number, which is you want to explicitly say how many pods or what percentage of load or whatever it is a buffer. And if you could represent that buffer, then the rest of the system can actually use that buffer for efficiency reasons. So you could have two workloads sharing the same buffer, and you don't need double the buffer. You actually need the buffer times the probability of. So that's the discussion I think Ray and I would love to have. So we'll tee it up for next week's working group and make sure we come back to it. And I think that's an input to CA, so it's related, but it's not. It's also an input to HPA, I think.
yeah, that's the simplest possible cluster autoscaler story. It's just relying on the current assumption of, do I have pending pods? If I do, then I need to find another node, and maybe I need to build a new node. But that italicized comment is more like static, sort of like minimum node capacity. Maybe provisioning request is what we can leverage to solve for that, which is to say, like when my cluster comes online, cluster autoscaler as an actor can build a number of sort of fixed static nodes to prepare to address that particular capacity constraint, which is different than the dynamic pending pods constraint. Yep.
Okay, sounds good. I add it to this next meeting section, so we'll make sure we don't forget. Okay, anything else for autoscaling? All right, Jiaxin, for multi-host, any updates?
Yes, there's a news from VRM 6 meetup on the KV cache transfer. This is from the engine side that I think is worth talking about it. So currently, like VRM provides two APIs for KV transfer, and the major scenario is the disaggregate, prefill disaggregation and the KV expansion. I think there's besides the disaggregation feature, there's a chance to integrate with some cloud native storage to expand the KV and offload those KV in the remote storage. Because right now, like inference engine only have the DRAM as the KV cache, and there's a lot of like research and practice to show like remote storage helps to expand the KV size. In that case, a lot of like RAG application or agent application can leverage from the cache reuse instead of the GPU computation. So we did some like benchmark and testing internally. It shows pretty solid like performance. But the current blocker I think here is whether there's some like cloud native storage, KV storage system can plug into the engine to support such cases. I think that's yeah, just I think FYI and worth exploration in the next phase.
Is that related to prefix cache too?
Yes, prefix cache. Right now in VRM, it only support the local DRAM, right? The hierarchy is not that deep. It doesn't include like remote memory pool and SSD, etc. But I think our statistics shows there's like 10 to 20% of the KV will overflow the DRAM. It needs the additional like storage to as a persistent, not persist as a cache layer. Yeah, so there's still a lot of like benefits using the remote cache layer. Yeah.
Can you help me with the intuition here as well? I thought that KV cache transfer latency is super critical for disaggregated serving to work efficiently.
Right.
But now we're talking about like, a persistent storage where like, that's, I'm assuming it's going to add a lot more overhead than simply, for example, transferring it even over DCN. So are we saying that transferring the cache is not a significant overhead in disaggregated serving?
I think the case is a little bit different. In this disaggregate inference, so the transfer happens between the prefill to the decode, right? So in the prefix cache use cases, it just retrieve the results directly. I mean the KV reusable part from the storage to the compute engine without any additional computation. So that's a little bit different. And based on the bandwidth, I think the DRAM, at least the like DRAM pool, is a very good fit. So that means any distributed in-memory pool will help in such case. And the remote storage, I mean the persistent storage, probably not a good fit. But our testing shows like local SSD is still qualified. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, that's an update.
Okay, Jiaxin, is there a link to the benchmark report? Do you have any public report that you can share?
That's something I think we did internally, but I'll find the VRM like public links and attach later. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we are done with workstream updates. For sub-project updates, we can start with instance gateway. Kellen, do you want to provide an update?
Sure. We are currently working on our API proposal. I shared the PR right there. Would love to drive to a reasonable alpha. I mean, if we do it tomorrow, that's awesome. But I'm predicting that it would be not this Thursday, but next, that we kind of get to a reasonable state. Love to get moving there. Also, we'll be handling some administrative stuff tomorrow, but that's not really relevant. I do want to call out, I have our proof of concept PR out. If anyone at all is interested in spinning that up, we have the README there. Hopefully it's easy to follow. I tried to do it a couple times myself. Would love for you guys to kick tires, challenge assumptions that we made, or maybe our experiments were off. That's what's going on with Instance Gateway.
Thanks, Kellen. That's a great update. Regarding the recurring meeting, right? Do we want to change the time? I know you did a poll, but what's the result?
Democracy says that we should keep it at the same time. That's fine with me. If there's any really strong voices that dislike that, we can talk about it, but it seems like we'll keep it at the same time.
It's on Thursdays, right?
Yep, Thursdays at 10 Pacific. I'm Arizona time, so that might change, but it's 10 for me right now. I don't know when daylight savings is.
Okay. Yeah, should be on the working group calendar.
Yeah.
Clayton, you had a hands up?
Yeah, I was going to add. I think we're. Kellen, did you get the proposal PR opened to working group serving repo?
Yes. The top level proposal. Yeah. Let me find out one.
And I'll say, I just want to reemphasize it here. We're like actively starting to really like grind out code and try to get consensus and to define scope. If folks here have a very concrete reason or a non-LLM use case that is super critical and it is something that can be exploited, we need to hear it now. Or I think we're going to basically defer it till after MVP, like whatever it takes to get to that. So it doesn't mean that we can't change course later, but if you are interested in LLM instance gateway and you're like, but I'm not an LLM, we need to know it sooner rather than later to be able to take that into account. So far, everybody that I've heard from has been, we think it makes sense to try for LLM first and then expand it to Gen AI, other Gen AI model types later, like diffusion plus LoRa or longer generative, but it's not the key goal right now. So just want to verify. And the right place to do that would be bring it up with Kellen and make sure you make a comment on the proposal in working group serving, because that's going to set the scope.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay. Serving catalog, Jason?
Yeah, no real updates on this for the past week. We have 2 PRs open for Kserve and multi-hosts that need to get submitted. I'm picking up work to put in support for Llama 3 8B on Jetstream PyTorch. That hopefully I can raise the PR in the next week. That's the only updates for now.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, the case of PR is still in draft. I'll ask my team to update it. Okay, anything else for sub-projects update? Okay, open topics. Matthews and Paul, you had a document to present, right?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, do you,
Hi.
your co-host, who'd like to share the screen?
Maybe Mattis, you can share your screen. Don't you mind?
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll make you a co-host for now.
Thank
Right,
you.
go ahead.
Just let me find the button to share my screen.
It should be short. Just to share with you the objective for us about this document is just to gather use cases and specific to multi-cluster management for inferences. So we gathered some questions about this topic in order for us just to contribute first on the prioritization of features that you, Clayton, you presented last meeting, and then we can maybe focus on some features that we would like to contribute on the project. Mattis, you have an issue sharing?
Yeah, I have trouble to share my screen on the
Paul,
browser.
I also made you a
Yeah.
co-host. Feel
Okay.
free to try it.
So yeah,
Let me try.
Coolio, I'm sorry. Just
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Maybe one question from me is maybe we can merge some of the questions or any problems we identified to the main problems exploration doc.
Yeah. Yeah, let me, so I should be able to share my screen now. Should be good. Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm sorry, Yuan. Can you repeat your question? Sorry, I didn't get that.
Not important. Let's discuss after your presentation.
Okay. So it's pretty straightforward. Just gathering some questions that we have about the how you manage several clusters and inferences across different clusters. Questions about the scheduling, Also the management, how you manage the routing between the different routing strategy between your different clusters. Obviously some question around observability. This is already open questions. Feel free to add anything that could can come up in your mind around this multi-cluster strategy. If you don't have all the answers, that's perfectly fine. We just need to gather as much as we can in order to propose some features in the roadmap. Mathis, do you want to focus on specific questions that you are looking for?
I mean, to me, one of the most important is the first question, because we are really looking to see if there is any, use cases where people are mixing traditional Kubernetes workloads with, let's say, SageMaker or Vertex workloads and managing them on the same control plane, anything like that, and if Kubernetes can help with that. So it will be like the central question on that.
Yeah,
we
met some companies who are looking for having some kind of burst network when they have their main cluster where they have their workloads, and sometimes they just need for a couple of minutes or hours some resources to deploy their workload, and these resources cannot be in the same regions or even sometimes the same provider that they currently have. So this is the kind of
Yes.
we've got recently.
Okay, so this is like a survey to the working group, right? Like, I wonder
Yes.
what the purpose of the survey is. Like, is it, you mentioned roadmap, right? Is that
It's
your
really to
product
contribute.
roadmap or something else?
No, it's really to contribute, because last time when Clayton shared the features prioritization, he mentioned that it was really focused on what they saw on their side, and we want just to be sure that we can maybe contribute on some features that cannot be that are not currently in the scope of the features selected recently. So if at the end of this survey we discover that okay, we already have all the main use cases and the prioritization is exactly the one we already have done in the past meeting, that's fine for us. We will contribute in that way. We just want to be sure that we are not missing something in this space.
Okay.
And I'll
some
just jump really quickly the queue and just say that's awesome. And we were trying to be very, very scoped. So that prioritization list already brutally expunged hundreds of totally relevant and interesting and exciting problems just to try to find that core scope. So I actually view this is almost the dual of it, which is doing discovery and looking at the broader problems. I find it very complementary because we tried to scope what we were doing for the Gateway project to be as concrete as possible. And there was a lot of stuff that I think needs to be explored. So from my perspective, this is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see some hands raised. Jack, you're first.
Yeah, real quickly, do you have any SIG multi-cluster sponsors, any plans to share this with the SIG that I would imagine would want to know about all these fun developments?
I'm sorry, just didn't catch the beginning of the question. Sorry, Jack.
So I just want to see what's the SIG multi-cluster story here to make sure that you can maybe recruit additional resources from there and get their sign off.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that. We didn't do this yet, but we should definitely do this. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I don't know if now is the right time based on the progress of this survey, but there's a meeting they meet bi-weekly on Tuesdays.
Okay.
Around nowish. So there's a meeting this coming Tuesday, the 17th.
Okay. So yeah, maybe we should wait first to have maybe some first answers and some feedback on the survey, and then try to reach out to them at the next meeting. Not not the one coming on next Tuesday, but like in 2 weeks.
That sounds reasonable. I'll be at that meeting, at least I'm planning to at this point. So I can, if no one else is there, I can just give a heads up, like exciting stuff is happening in the working group.
That would be great.
gonna
Yeah, would be
come up.
awesome.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, Jiaxin, you are next.
Yes, I'm curious. Have you considered any like federation solutions? I think yeah, there's FedV2 and a lot of other like Red Hat or Huawei. They release their own like multi-cluster solutions, right? Like Commanda, etc. Technically, this problem is very close to like a federation problem, like involve like multi-deployment. Um, I'm checking like any like special part you can think of. It can be differentiated with other with the traditional like multi-cluster problems.
You're right. It's the first thing that came up in our mind when we thought about multi-cluster, of course, federation. Right now, I don't want to put any words in any mouth right now. I just want to be sure that if they address this, maybe they address with a federation tool, or maybe they are doing this differently. Right now, I just need what I would like to hear is this a problem that you currently have, and probably because today we can see that a lot of people start to have GPUs all around the place, so in different clusters. So how do they manage this? Because if there's just GPUs, maybe they don't need to use some kind of overlay of federation on top of it, but maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. It's one of the questions we may have here.
Makes sense.
It's overall, I think it's really open questions around this topic. So yes, feel free to add anything you think we are missing right here.
Yes, and the main idea is that the first question is catching these people doing federation across clusters. It's also to know the maturity of people on this kind of subject with multi-cluster federation.
And Clayton, you were mentioning about. I'm sorry, I'm asking the question right at the moment you are eating carrots. But I just had a question about the API definition. You were mentioning that you would like to know if there is other use cases which are really important to get except LLM as soon as we can. Do you know, like, is there any timeline where we like a day where we need to say, okay, there is something that we want for the MVP, and after it's too late, I mean, until we have the MVP, or is something like you are considering next week or this Thursday?
Sorry, are you asking a question?
To Clayton.
Okay.
Sorry, I was completely distracted in the background. I just asked
No
that
worries.
question.
No worries. Now, my question was about you were mentioning just before, like you would like to have for the MVP to know if there is other kind of model except LLMs that we would need to address inside the MVP. Do you have a cutoff date when you need to know, or it's something like next Thursday, or?
I mean, the context is that for LLMs, there's something that we can really exploit. The fact that you can parallelize them and you can run a lot of other things that can't be parallelized. You can exploit some differences, but it's kind of the difference between you can get like a 3x speed up in some cases from a 0.05% speed up in some cases. Yep. And so I think the thing I'd be looking for, if someone has one of those use cases where they've got this kind of large scale generative AI use case, and load balancing or routing is very important. I just haven't heard it, so I'm afraid that I'm not hearing it because, sorry, where we can deliver something significantly better than what load balancers already do. So, or queuing infrastructure already does. So actually, maybe that would be a useful question, which is we tend to focus on online serving, and Gateway is a little aimed at online serving right now. But as latencies increase, or as the parallelism of your backends decreases, then queuing infrastructures matter. So maybe like that would be a great question to add, something along the lines of for inference serving, are you mixing? Are you using a queuing infrastructure? Whatever form that is, are you using an RPC style infrastructure, or are you using a mix? And what are the challenges you're hitting? Like one very concrete challenge that I've heard from a customer is they're using PubSub to distribute requests, but PubSub load balancing is not designed for super fine-grained, like ensure that every backend always has a topic. Like it's lumpy because it's designed to work for millions of QPS.
Yeah.
And so the problem that we see on the LLM instance gateway that led to it was you're running 10 QPS and an H100 costs 100 times what a single CPU costs. So you should be spending at least 1 to 10 CPUs to save 1 hour of H100 time. And I think that's like that key intuition. I haven't yet heard of one of those for something besides it. So yeah, talking about the queuing infrastructure, maybe we're just missing some problems. I think the timeline is flexible. I'd like to kind of know before we get out of September. I think we're kind of on a path where we're just going to do something specific for LLMs. So, by end of September would be a good heuristic.
Okay.
I don't think we would not do what we're doing. We would just want to say, oh, we might want to grow the scope, or maybe an architectural change is necessary. I kind of had mentally punted that to like post the MVP because of the complexity.
To path the road after the MVP. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. If you have any questions, just feel free to contact us, and would be great. And very excited for both Matisse and I to contribute to the project.
Yeah, thank you, Paul and Matisse.
Thank you.
Okay, let me take the screen again. Okay, Clayton, you're next.
Yep. So last week, Nick Stagner and Sam Stolinga had announced like they did a Cube AI open source project. It's linked in there. It's interesting. A lot of the threads in there will be familiar to what we've talked about. Where auto scaling and workload API and proxying, and it's a great example of kind of pull it all together and make it just work. And I think some of what we're focused on is like, what are those composable pieces? But I asked Nick to come next week to present, so folks should look through Cube AI and think about questions for Nick, and hope that I think the thing I'd like to do is any open source project that has users that are learning important things that people in this working group want to go help tackle, so that the heavy lifting on Cube is easier. That's part of our charter. So it was just, I think it'd be a great opportunity. Sam and I had a discussion just about inference gateway, and it's not really like, that's not the primary thing they're trying to do. They're trying to make it really easy for Cube AI to just work and to solve this kind of model problem. And there's some similarities to Kaito. So I felt that would be good to have him come in, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. I was actually coincidentally on a similar thread with Nick, since I remember Kube AI also has a caching mechanism that kind of overlaps with what KSOV is also working on. So yeah, it would be good to hear from them next meeting. Did you share the meeting information with them yet? You're on mute, Clayton.
I just briefly touched base with him. Maybe Jan and I can chat with him and just make sure he's got everything he needs for next week. Give him a slot and a time.
Okay. Any questions from the group? Okay, next item, Ashok, benchmarking.
Yeah, this is an update to the previous discussion we have had. Let me share my screen.
Yep. 1 second, let me make you a co-host. Okay, you should be able to share.
Cool, thanks. Okay, sharing the screen, make it a little bigger. So this is the doc we went over last time when I called out like what are some of the common problems that we have that we want to address in the Kubernetes side for LLM and in general GenAI benchmarking, right? Which is we need something that is model server accelerator agnostic that we can run against any inference stack setup to measure performance and the specific metrics that we want. We should be able to find what is the saturation point for a model server so that we can find the right point effectively auto scale. We also want to measure baseline performance with auto scaling and kind of decide which metric and threshold gives us better performance. And now we have instance gateway and other orchestration related enhancements that are coming up, which would need benchmarking to kind of say how well they work. I see a hand from Clayton.
Yeah, I was going to add, I was just thinking I was going to add a requirement, even based on some discussions. Like, I think, or I would suggest getting an apples to apples for a very concrete workload across vastly different hardware types. Like the comment from Judgen just now in the chat about how difficult it, you're not going to have the same infrastructure in some of these places. And sometimes you are going to want to run the same use case against a model as a service endpoint or something you run on a Kubernetes cluster, because maybe you're using that as a fallback or whatever. So maybe that could be like I think it's to repeatably rerun a specific workload scenario for generative AI testing against multiple infrastructure variations, inclusive of not running on Kubernetes at all or something like that would be it'd be useful, I think, to add that. I had a discussion yesterday with someone who, everybody's doing this benchmarking stuff, and one of the nice things was if someone could just point you to a file that had a bunch of questions about like what their scenario looked like. That's a thing I've noticed, like just doing over and over, is I can't even get apples to apples comparisons between two different use cases without asking a bunch of the same questions over and over. And some definition of that would be super useful.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, I think we should be able to do it with the proposal. Let me go over that too. So yeah, these are some of the initial requirements, and if you have other ones, please comment so we can include those as well. So previously I touched upon like the two options we have. One is we pick a tool that does like web server benchmarking well, and then incorporate the LLM and the GenAI use case into it. The other one is we pick like a general benchmarking script, like what VLLM or some of the model servers have, and then expand it into a tool that will work well with Kubernetes and support auto scaling, instance gateway, and all those different use cases. So those are kind of like the two options we have here. So I have some experience running one locus to do some of this, and two, we have also ran VLLM kind of Python scripts to do some benchmarking. And I looked into some of the other options that are out there as well, right? Similar to locus, there is like Apache JMeter, Gatling K6, and all of these. This one gives a breakdown of what languages they use, what are some other things that are missing today, And the general thing that all of these miss is the ability to adapt it for LLM well enough. Some of these are extensible, which makes it easier, but they also have specific issues once you get into it. Right? For example, with locus specifically, we have issues with not being able to control the request per second, the RPS. You can only set users and then kind of use that model to generate load. And then gRPC support is lacking. How you manage locust has some issues. How you generate spikes is difficult and stuff like that. So one thing from our experience that we found out was adapting one of these tools to this. We are facing more and more friction, and it would be better to start with like a Python-based benchmarking tool that we can then expand to support the other cases. Is much easier, right? So with that, I have like a design on how this would look like. We also have like a basic prototype of this that I can share later as well. So essentially, we need to have these components as part of this benchmarking tool, right? One, we need something that can take in a data set that someone can present and then pre-process it so that we find the specific request length for the input prompt and what kind of output we want to generate. Then obviously we need a load generator, which would generate different kinds of loads. For example, if you want to auto scale, you might want to hit a steady state first and then introduce a spike, which lasts for like 10 minutes or so. So that traffic pattern is something that the load generator can generate. And then we need a request processor. This is where like we can support like different model servers, different API request bodies and parameters. So this would basically have the intelligence to say, if it is a VLLM server, this is the API you use. If it is TGI, this is what you use and stuff like that. And like Clayton was pointing out, we could potentially expand this to like hit like SageMaker endpoint, Vertex, or any of those, because we are mostly agnostic of where and how the inference server itself is running. And then once we generate this load with the specific request types, we need to process the response. And this is where we would collect the stats that we would need, right? Time to first token, teapot, how does the latency and throughput look and all of it. And finally, we need a way to like compile this into a report or export these as Prometheus metrics so they can be easily consumed, right? A report obviously you would need so that you can see how we did during the benchmarking run. Exporting as metrics has other advantages, like you can then set up monitoring or you can look it up in your Grafana dashboard and stuff like that on how things work during this benchmarking run, right? So this is something we can start with. I've started experimenting with the VLLM benchmarking script from the VLLM repo and started adding like other model server support, tweaking the load generator and some more things. I believe starting there, we can expand to support all the use cases that I mentioned here. And with the setup like this, we can do all of these things well, right? We can support different prompts. Initially, it could be just chat completion, but then in the future, we can expand this to like supporting like images and, for example, code generation, summarization, and other different use cases. And we can expand to support different model servers and their API formats, different traffic patterns as we would need, and a way to get all the different metrics that we would want. In the LLM metric standardization, we called out like specific metrics that would be of interest. So this allows us and gives us control in collecting all the things that we would need. So yeah, that's just to go over how we could have this tool function. I have a prototype that I can share probably next week to kind of give a demo of how this works. But I wanted to get some feedback on one, the approach, two, if you'd have any specific requirements that we can include. And three, I also want to discuss the next steps on what we can do here and if this is something that we can do as part of the serving working group. I see a couple of hands. I don't know who's first. Jack?
Jack, go
was
first.
first. Okay, cool. I thank you for this, Ashok. I'm curious if in your options, did you consider leveraging Cluster Loader 2, which is SIG Scalability's standard test for testing all manner of things at scale, and or evolving Cluster Loader 2 with if there are any new requirements that you are introducing that aren't present there to accomplish what you want?
Yeah, cluster loader I haven't looked into much. We looked into it a while back to figure out like startup latency and stuff. For this one, I didn't, so that's something I can take an AI on to look at it.
I have
Okay,
a
cool. I think
somewhat
this would want to be
strong opinion.
eventually adopted. Okay, go ahead. I want to hear Clayton's strong opinion.
So I would have. I was interested because the comments I was going to add, I think, were getting at like a decision or a philosophy question. But so let me actually start with that. One of the advantages of the Python approach is that everything in the ecosystem is, and it's not called out. I think you should call it out, which is if this is something that people can embed in code and bring in other libraries in the Gen AI ecosystem, that's hugely valuable, right? Like the most obvious one is tokenizers. You know, if I want to do statistical analysis of, you know, token, like because tokens are what the engines are actually running. If I want to do statistical analysis of tokens, I should probably call the tokenizer. Like you can do math, like you can come up with some heuristics and look at statistics, but like different use cases are going to have different token distributions, and that may matter 5, 10, 15, 30%. So being able to even access the tokenizers or client libraries, thinking about using this with arbitrary client libraries, because in a lot of cases, the benchmark we care about isn't benchmarking API endpoints, it's benchmarking a client tool, because people are going to use a set of standard client tools. So there's some value in the Python approach that we don't quite call out here. It's probably worth discussing. And then the second thing is that as I was looking through the processing, I was like, well, if I'm doing processing, why can't I use this to also do quality evaluation at the same time, or help me acquire groups of responses that I can then apply quality metrics? And that's a scope and expansion, so I'm not necessarily arguing for it. But I know that Ashok, you and I have, like we've chatted about this for the quality evaluation is a broad, and everybody kind of figures out their own tools. If we've got a really good benchmarking tool, there is the open-ended, you know, being able to do quality evaluation across multiple different endpoints is something that, you know, maybe this library doesn't do directly, but it would be useful for that. So for both of those reasons, and like contrasting it with cluster loader, I think that's like Jack, like my third comment was like that section at the end about the API. If we're going down this Python path, it's not about benchmark as data, it's about benchmark as code. And so that's maybe like the higher level, like what are the advantages of doing benchmark as code? And would it make sense that, you know, like would it actually be an advantage that you have a code thing that you can do all this powerful stuff, but yeah, it's not as, you can't represent it in an easy to use Cube API for the benchmark tool. But in some respect, cluster loader kind of is benchmark as data. And so like, I was kind of like working through those, like, Ashok, I don't know like how much else you've heard, if others have feedback around that. Like so much of what's happening in the Gen AI ecosystem is just give me Python code. And I think we should be sensitive to that. Whereas like we tend to have a bias, like let's come up with some YAML. And maybe this is an area where Cube needs to change a little bit.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. Like, I mean, one thing that you didn't call it explicitly, but the idea that the actual devs are writing the tests sort of naturally as part of their implementations is something that Cluster Loader 2 cannot accommodate. That's like an entirely different sort of vertical expertise that folks who are maybe even doing things at scale in Kubernetes have to either choose to learn how Cluster Loader 2, all of its little quirks, or they just don't incorporate, they write their own thing. And then Cluster Loader 2 has a sort of coverage gap in terms of what they're doing. The only sort of meta point I would make, and this is kind of an echo of the previous comment I made, this sounds like something SIG Scalability would be super interested in. So maybe bring this to SIG Scalability and get their thumbs up.
Yeah, and actually, like it's an interesting thing to like if we were to a conference, like if we were at like the RayConf or something like that, no one there would think about benchmarking in terms of like how it impacts a cluster. They think about like, like, oh, I want to send this data, and I want to get, like, it's an ML engineering problem too. So like maybe this is something I think, Ashok, that like you need to really clarify and like, get some of that feedback and actually try to maybe articulate if there's a strong advantage for doing benchmark as code, lean into it. Don't split the difference. Like pick benchmark as code or benchmark as data and go down one of the two paths. If folks here have, like, I think, we've talked to a number of people who do things like this. Are they doing benchmark as code? A lot of them are.
Yeah. Yeah, at least one of the main goals is to support extensibility with using the tool itself, right? For example, you can have the load gen and then plug in your own logic to benchmark something specific that you want. I do feel like we need to support benchmark as code in some way. But once you have that to automate it, I feel like we also need to provide some tools which will make it easier to run and if you just want to get the data that you need.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions on the design side, if nobody else has a hand up, which was, does the, when we do Python scripts, it's not like, one of the advantages is we're not dealing with infinite amounts of load. So in a realistic test scenario, you're not dispatching millions of QPS. And so the disadvantages of Python for some of the careful library choices and careful design choices you might have to make in a Python library just are almost irrelevant. Whereas for Cube and Cube Loader, Cluster Loader, we are trying to saturate servers that are designed to handle at least, thousands, if not tens of thousands of QPS, returning, 100 megabyte and more responses in some cases. Whereas I don't know at least for the LLM scenario here that we're going to be hitting that. Now, Ashok, I'll maybe ask the other question. Have you considered, should you explicitly call this out as an LLM? Like, this is to echo the same question for Gary. Is this an LLM benchmarking tool, or is this a Gen AI benchmarking tool?
So I would like this to be a Gen AI benchmarking tool, but at least the initial case that we try to solve is the LLM one. The hope is we can design it in a way where we want to start supporting diffusion models, imaging, and stuff like that. It should be easier to do. Killer?
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. And kind of riffing off Clayton's benchmarking as code, is the design leaning towards like a library where we would have like, hey, this is how we benchmarked LLM, and we put that in our catalog, our serving catalog, and then kind of just give them the tools. Hey, this is how you would do stable diffusion, yada yada. So then we kind of have a standard, but also they can adjust to their needs. I'm curious there.
Yeah, so each of the individual portions, I think you should be able to use as a library, right? So if someone who doesn't want automation to run it on Kubernetes or just focused on data, they should be able to just import and use it as a part of their workflow or be able to run specific portions of it themselves. Yeah, but I think as we build it, we need to make sure it supports those specific cases.
Yeah, I have a question regarding metrics exporter. Since Ashok, you also worked on the metric standardization doc, I wonder how much are we planning to leverage existing metrics from those model servers themselves instead of us trying to come up with a library to export those metrics.
Yeah, so we can do a few things here, right? One, during the benchmark, we can actually look at the metrics that are coming from the model server, right? What the model server queue size, batch size was like, what is the teapot, time to first token, seeing in the model server and such. So those are definitely something we can export and use. This metric exporter is mainly to call out, like, from benchmarking side itself, if we need to produce additional of course, we are collecting a bunch of data. If we need to produce additional metrics based on that, that is something we can export through that as well. The plan is to definitely include any model server metrics that we want to show as part of this.
Okay.
One more comment, because I know we're just about out of time. Ashok, it would probably actually be useful to go, maybe if have you had a conversation with the VLLM benchmarking developers, what people who developed and maintained that VLLM benchmark?
I have some conversation with a couple of folks from the LLM side who are doing benchmarking, but I haven't talked to whoever was the main contributor who added the VLLM benchmark.
Because I guess like the question would be like the audience, if we could like through like we have metric standardization as a goal. Do you have a benchmarking tool that like all the major model servers could draw as a library, and they all found it better than maintaining their own benchmarking tool because it was predictable and reliable? That's a really strong signal. It might be extra work, but it would also ground it. Like if VLLM continues to have a benchmarking tool and Triton continues to have a benchmarking tool, and you can't use the VLLM tool safely with somebody else, like what are the trade-offs? Can we abstract more of that infrastructure?
Yeah, that makes sense.
A final quick comment to jump in on there to dovetail with what Clayton said, that might also drive or create a focal point for driving some standardization around the metrics that those open source servers are exporting, because there's some quite a bit of overlap, but there's certain areas where they diverge as well in how they're reporting. So having a standard tool that everyone starts using would help drive that standardization.
Agreed.
All right, we are running over time, so thank you, Ashok, for the proposal. Anything else, folks? All right, that's it for today then. Yeah. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.